The explosion rocked the courthouse steps, sending plumes of smoke billowing into the crisp autumn air. Screams erupted from the crowd as people scattered in panic. Everyone except Sofia Mendez, who stood frozen in place, her wide eyes fixed on the burning car that had, just moments ago, belonged to her father. "Dad!" Sofia screamed, lunging forward only to be restrained by a police officer. "Stay back, miss. It's not safe." But safety was the furthest thing from her mind. Her father, Judge Carlos Mendez, had been targeted because of the high-profile corruption case he was presiding over, a case involving some of the city's most dangerous criminals. As the ambulance sirens wailed in the distance, Sofia's world collapsed around her. 3 weeks later, Sofia sat in a sterile hospital room, her fingers intertwined with her father's motionless hand. The doctors had been clear. His treatment would require experimental procedures not covered by insurance, costing millions they didn't have. "There has to be another way," Sofia whispered to the silent room. Dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights spent researching medical grants and loan options. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. The door swung open to reveal a tall, imposing figure. Alexander Sterling, the city's most notorious billionaire and owner of Sterling Enterprises. His steel-gray eyes surveyed the room with cold calculation before landing on Sofia. "Miss Mendez," he said, his voice deep and emotionless. "I believe I have a proposition that might interest you." Sofia straightened in her chair, instantly suspicious. Alexander Sterling's reputation preceded him, brilliant but ruthless in business, and famously devoid of any warmth or humor. She'd encountered him briefly at charity galas where she'd worked as an event coordinator, but he'd never so much as acknowledged her existence. "Mr. Sterling, this is hardly the time or place. Your father needs specialized medical treatment available only in Switzerland. Treatment that costs approximately $8 million. He stated this as casually as if discussing the weather, not the astronomical sum that had been haunting Sofia's nightmares. Sofia felt her chest tighten. "How do you know that?" "I make it my business to know things, Miss Mendez." He stepped further into the room, his bespoke suit contrasting sharply with the clinical surroundings. "I'm prepared to cover all medical expenses and ensure your father receives the best care possible." Hope surged through Sofia momentarily before suspicion clouded it. Nothing came free from men like Alexander Sterling. "And what would you want in return?" she asked cautiously. Alexander's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes, something calculating and intense. "Marriage." The word hung in the air between them, absurd and impossible. Sofia laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "You can't be serious." "I'm always serious, Miss Mendez. I require a wife for business purposes. You need money to save your father. It's a simple transaction." "Transaction?" Sofia stood up, indignation flaring. "Marriage isn't a business deal." Alexander raised an eyebrow, unmoved by her outburst. "In my world, everything is a business deal. You would have access to my resources, live in comfort, and your father would receive the treatment he needs. In return, you would fulfill the role of Mrs. Sterling at social events and business functions for a minimum of 1 year. Sofia glanced at her father's pale face, the beeping machines keeping him alive, and felt the weight of responsibility crushing her. The walls seemed to close in as the impossible choice confronted her. Her freedom or her father's life. "Why me?" she asked softly, buying time to process the outlandish proposal. For the first time, Alexander looked slightly uncomfortable. "You have a reputation for intelligence, dignity, and discretion. You know how to navigate social situations, and you're presentable." His eyes flickered briefly over her as if assessing merchandise. Sofia felt her blood boil at his clinical evaluation, but before she could retort, he continued. "More importantly, you have no romantic entanglements that might complicate matters, and you need something only I can provide. It's efficient." "Efficient," she repeated hollowly. "You're talking about my life." "I'm talking about saving your father's life," he countered. "The papers are already drawn up. You have 24 hours to decide." With that, he placed a business card on the hospital bed table and turned to leave, his movements precise and controlled. "Mr. Sterling," Sofia called out, making him pause at the doorway. "Has anyone ever told you that you have the emotional range of a calculator?" For a split second, something that might have been amusement crossed his face. Regularly, Miss Mendez. I'll await your call. As the door closed behind him, Sophia sank back into her chair, her mind racing. A marriage of convenience to the coldest man in the city, or watching her father die knowing she could have saved him? Some choice. What Alexander Sterling didn't know was that Sophia Mendez wasn't simply going to accept her fate if she agreed. No, if she was going to sell her freedom, she was determined to make sure the arrogant billionaire got more than he bargained for. Much more. Sophia stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of her modest apartment, barely recognizing the woman looking back at her. 24 hours had passed since Alexander Sterling's proposal, and she'd made her decision. Not that there had ever really been a choice. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, straightening her shoulders. 1 year, just 1 year of your life for Dad's entire future. Her phone buzzed with a text. "The car is waiting downstairs. A.S." Of course he wouldn't even come up himself. Everything was a delegation in his world. Sophia grabbed her worn leather purse, a stark contrast to what would soon be her new life, and took one last look around the cozy one-bedroom apartment she'd called home for the past 5 years. The mismatched furniture, the wall of family photos, the bookshelf overflowing with dog-eared paperbacks, all spoke of a life built with love rather than money. A life she was about to leave behind. Sterling Tower pierced the skyline like a monument to ambition, all gleaming glass and sharp angles. Sophia felt underdressed in her simple navy dress as she was escorted through the lobby, acutely aware of curious glances from employees who clearly recognized her as out of place. Alexander's executive assistant, a frighteningly efficient woman named Vivian, who looked like she ironed her ponytail, led Sophia into a conference room on the top floor. "Mr. Sterling will be with you shortly," Vivian said, her tone suggesting that shortly meant precisely when Alexander deemed appropriate, not a moment sooner. Sophia didn't bother sitting down. Instead, she walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city sprawled below. Somewhere out there was the hospital where her father lay unconscious, unaware that his daughter was about to sign away her freedom to save his life. "The view is one of the building's best features," came Alexander's voice from behind her. Sophia turned to find him watching her, his expression as unreadable as ever. Today, his tailored charcoal suit made his eyes look almost silver in the natural light. "I prefer what's beyond the view," Sophia replied. "Real people living real lives." Something like curiosity flickered across his face before he gestured to the conference table, where a thick document lay waiting. "The marriage contract," he explained unnecessarily. "My lawyers have been thorough." Sophia approached the table warily. "I brought my own lawyer." She pulled out her phone and pressed dial. Alexander's eyebrows rose slightly. "I wasn't aware." "Mia, you're on speaker," Sophia announced as her best friend's voice filled the room. "Is the Ice King there?" came Mia's irreverent voice. "Hi, Mr. Fancy Pants. Just so you know, if you mistreat my girl, I know 17 different ways to make a death look natural causes. I watch a lot of true crime." Sophia suppressed a smile at Alexander's momentarily stunned expression. "Miss Rodriguez, graduated law school top of her class, passed the bar first try, and currently works at the public defender's office because, unlike some people, she has a soul." Sophia supplied. "I've prepared some amendments to your contract," Mia continued, "all business now. Sophia's emailing them over. And yes, before you ask, I am legally qualified to do this." Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as he motioned to Vivian, who had materialized at his side. She efficiently printed the email document. "Perhaps we should discuss these amendments," Alexander said, scanning the pages with growing incredulity. "Non-negotiable," Sophia stated firmly, channeling confidence she didn't entirely feel. "You want a business transaction? Fine, but I'm not signing away my entire existence. I keep my job at the event planning company. I maintain my own bank account. I have veto power over public appearances if they conflict with my father's medical appointments. And after our divorce, you will fund a foundation in my father's name for victims of judicial intimidation." Alexander studied her with new interest, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "You've given this considerable thought. That's what happens when someone tries to purchase you, Mr. Sterling. You assess your market value." A charge filled the air between them as their eyes locked in silent challenge. Sophia refused to look away, despite the thundering of her heart. After what felt like eternity, Alexander picked up a pen. "Your terms are acceptable, with one addition of my own." Sophia tensed. "Which is?" "You'll move into my penthouse immediately. For appearance's sake," he added when she began to protest. "The press would find it suspicious if we maintained separate residences after the wedding." The wedding. The word made everything suddenly, terrifyingly real. "When exactly is this wedding supposed to happen?" Sophia asked, her voice smaller than she intended. "Tomorrow," Alexander replied matter-of-factly. "City Hall. I've arranged everything." "Tomorrow?" Sophia echoed incredulously. "But that's efficient," he finished for her. "Your father's airlift to Switzerland is scheduled for the day after. Time is of the essence, Miss Mendez." Sophia closed her eyes briefly, reminding herself why she was doing this. When she opened them, she reached for the pen in Alexander's hand, their fingers brushing momentarily. She ignored the unexpected jolt that ran through her at the contact. "One more thing," she said, pulling her hand back quickly. "In public, you treat me with respect. No one can know this is anything but a genuine relationship. I won't be humiliated or treated like a possession." Alexander's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes shifted. Respect, perhaps, or surprise at her backbone. "Agreed," he said simply. Sophia signed her name on the designated lines, each stroke of the pen sealing her fate. When she finished, she looked up to find Alexander watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Congratulations, Miss Mendez," he said as he added his own signature to the document. "You've just become the future Mrs. Sterling. And you," she replied with forced sweetness, "have just purchased yourself the world's most reluctant bride." For a fleeting moment, Sophia could have sworn she saw the corner of Alexander's mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, but the closest thing to humor she'd witnessed from him. "I'll have Vivian coordinate the moving of your belongings," he said, rising from his chair. "Is there anything specific you require at the penthouse?" Sophia thought of her tiny apartment with its warmth and character, then imagined the sterile luxury that likely defined Alexander's home. "Just one thing," she replied. "A plant." Alexander blinked, clearly not expecting that request. "A plant?" "Yes, something living to counterbalance all that steel and glass I'm sure you surround yourself with." Sophia gathered her purse, suddenly eager to escape his unsettling gaze. "Consider it the first of many changes coming your way, Mr. Sterling." As she walked toward the door, head held high despite the weight of what she'd just done, she heard him call after her. "Sophia." She paused, surprised by his use of her first name. "If we're to be married tomorrow, perhaps you should start calling me Alexander." Sophia turned just enough to see him over her shoulder. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Alex." She left him standing there, contract in hand, a bemused expression replacing his usual mask of indifference. Small victories, she told herself as the elevator doors closed. In a war of wills against Alexander Sterling, she would take every small victory she could get. Little did she know, Alexander was thinking precisely the same thing about her. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." The city clerk closed her booklet with a snap, looking expectantly between them. "You may kiss the bride." Sophia froze. This particular detail hadn't been covered in the contract. Alexander smoothly stepped forward, placing one hand lightly on her waist and bending to brush his lips against her cheek. His cologne, something expensive and subtle, momentarily overwhelmed her senses. For appearance's sake, he murmured into her ear, his breath warm against her skin. Sophia nodded stiffly, hyper-aware of the small audience of necessary witnesses. Vivian, the ever-present assistant, and Mia, who was shooting daggers at Alexander with her eyes while simultaneously giving Sophia encouraging thumbs-ups. Outside City Hall, a sleek black Bentley waited, surrounded by a handful of photographers who appeared out of nowhere once Alexander emerged. "Mr. Sterling, is it true you just got married?" "Alexander, who's the lucky woman? Over here. Look this way." Sophia instinctively recoiled from the flashing cameras. Alexander's arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders, guiding her toward the car. "Smile," he instructed quietly. "This will be the most efficient way to announce our marriage." "You planned this?" Sophia accused under her breath, maintaining a forced smile. "Of course," Alexander replied, opening the car door for her with surprising strep gallantry. Sterling Enterprises stock will rise 3 points by market close once news breaks of my settling down. Of course, he'd quantified even that. Sophia slid into the car, relief washing over her as the tinted windows blocked out the cameras. Alexander joined her in the back seat a moment later, immediately pulling out his phone and typing with rapid precision. Your father's airlift is confirmed for tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. The medical team reports he's stable for transport. Sophia felt a surge of gratitude cut through her resentment. Thank you, she said softly. Alexander glanced up, seemingly surprised by her sincere tone. For a moment, something almost human flickered in his eyes before he looked away, back to his phone. It's part of our agreement. Still, Sophia insisted, thank you for saving his life. Alexander shifted uncomfortably, clearly unused to genuine expressions of gratitude. The penthouse has been prepared for your arrival. I had your belongings moved while we were at City Hall. Sophia's heart sank at the thought of strangers packing up her personal items. Including my plant? The question seemed to catch him off guard. Yes, including your plant, he confirmed with the faintest hint of amusement. Though I'm not certain it will survive. It looked unwell. Mr. Pickles just needs some attention, Sophia defended. You named your plant Mr. Pickles? Alexander asked incredulously. Don't judge me, Alex. We've been married less than an hour. The corner of Alexander's mouth twitched. Alexander, he corrected. Definitely Alex, Sophia countered, feeling an odd satisfaction at the tiny furrow between his brows. If she had to endure this arrangement, at least she could entertain herself by chipping away at his perfectly controlled facade. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a luxury building in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. As the private elevator ascended, Sophia's stomach knotted with anxiety. She was about to see firsthand how the other half, or more accurately, the other 0.001% lived. The doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, revealing a space that managed to be both exactly what Sophia had expected and somehow still surprising. Minimalist design, monochromatic color scheme, spectacular views, all anticipated. But the space also featured rare art pieces that showed genuine taste and, most surprisingly, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with well-worn classics. You read? Sophia blurted out, then immediately flushed at how it sounded. Alexander raised an eyebrow. Did you think I processed information solely through spreadsheets and financial reports? The thought had crossed my mind, Sophia admitted, running her fingers along the spines of leather-bound volumes. First editions? Some, Alexander acknowledged. My grandfather started the collection. Reading was the one frivolity he had permitted. Sophia filed away this rare personal detail. Where's my room? The East Wing. I've had the master guest suite prepared. My quarters are in the West Wing. Sophia relaxed slightly at the confirmation they wouldn't be sharing a bedroom. Not that she'd truly expected it, but still, boundaries were important. I'll show you, Alexander offered unexpectedly, leading her through the sprawling space. The master guest suite turned out to be larger than Sophia's entire apartment, with a sitting area, a massive bathroom featuring a soaking tub that could accommodate a small party, and a bedroom centered around a king-sized bed. Sophia's modest belongings had been unpacked and arranged with military precision. Mr. Pickles, her drooping pothose plant, sat forlornly on the windowsill. Your assistant even color-coded my closet, Sophia noted, peering into the walk-in space where her modest wardrobe occupied a tiny fraction of the available space. That would be the house staff, Alexander corrected. You'll meet them tomorrow. I've given them the rest of the day off to allow you time to adjust. Sophia turned to him, suddenly overwhelmed by the surreal situation. 24 hours ago, she'd been in her father's hospital room. Now she was married to one of the richest men in the country, standing in a penthouse that probably cost more than she would earn in several lifetimes. This is insane, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Alexander studied her, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. Would you like some time alone? Sophia nodded gratefully. Please. I'll be in my office if you need anything. Dinner is at 7. With that, he turned and left, closing the door quietly behind him. Sophia sank onto the edge of the bed, reaching for her phone to text Mia. I'm officially Mrs. Billionaire Robot. Send help. Mia's response was immediate. How's the sex? Sophia nearly choked. Mia, it's not that kind of arrangement. Boo, all that money and no orgasms? Worst deal ever. Despite everything, Sophia laughed, then covered her mouth, worried the sound might carry in the cavernous apartment. She moved to the window, gazing out at the city stretched below her. Somewhere out there was the hospital, and tomorrow her father would be on his way to treatment that could save his life. Worth it, she reminded herself. All of this strangeness was worth it. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Yes," she called. Alexander's voice came through the door. "I forgot to mention, there's a dress in the closet for tonight. We have dinner reservations at Elysium at 8. The press will likely be there." Of course they would. The public unveiling of Mrs. Sterling. Sophia opened the door to find Alexander standing there, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows, a surprisingly human look for him. "I don't recall a dinner debut on today's schedule," she had said, crossing her arms. "It's necessary," Alexander replied. "The sooner our marriage becomes public knowledge, the better for all concerned parties." "And the stock price," Sophia added dryly. Alexander didn't deny it. "Be ready at 7:30. The dress is Valentino." As he turned to leave, Sophia called after him. "What if I don't like the dress?" Alexander paused, looking back at her with that same flicker of amusement. "Then by all means, wear something else. Contrary to what you might believe, Sophia, I'm not actually interested in controlling every aspect of your existence. Just the important ones," she muttered. "Precisely," he agreed without a hint of irony, disappearing down the hallway. Sophia closed the door and leaned against it, blowing out a long breath. Then, curiosity got the better of her, and she went to investigate the dress. The garment bag contained a simple yet elegant black dress with a subtle sparkle to the fabric. It was beautiful, tasteful, and Sophia checked the size tag, exactly her size. How did he know? She wondered aloud, then remembered the thoroughness of Alexander's research into her life. She laid the dress on the bed, then walked into the bathroom to run a hot bath. If she was going to be paraded around as the new Mrs. Sterling tonight, she might as well enjoy some of the perks of her new life. An hour later, soaking in bubbles and sipping a glass of wine she'd found in a small bar in her sitting room, Sophia finally allowed herself to acknowledge the thought that had been nagging at her all day. Alexander Sterling was not exactly what she had expected. Cold? Yes. Calculating? Definitely. But there were glimpses of something else beneath the surface. Something almost human. And that, Sophia realized with alarm, might be far more dangerous than the emotionless automaton she'd prepared herself to deal with. "Mrs. Sterling, how did you and Alexander meet?" Sophia took a sip of her champagne, buying herself a moment to recall the carefully crafted backstory they'd agreed upon during the car ride to Elysium, the city's most exclusive restaurant. "Through a charity gala," she answered smoothly, aware of Alexander's attentive presence beside her. "I was coordinating the event, and Alexander was a major donor." "Love at first sight?" The society reporter pressed, her pen poised eagerly over her notepad. Alexander's hand settled on the small of Sophia's back, his touch unexpectedly warm through the thin fabric of her dress. "I knew she was special immediately," he said, his voice taking on a quality Sophia hadn't heard before, almost soft. "Sophia challenges me in ways no one else dares to." Well, that part wasn't a lie. The reporter seemed delighted by this uncharacteristic display from the normally reserved businessman. "And the whirlwind romance? You've only been seen together publicly a handful of times. We preferred to keep our relationship private," Sophia interjected, leaning slightly into Alexander's touch in a show of affection that felt surprisingly natural. "Until we were certain." "Certain enough for marriage," the reporter noted with a smile. "When you know, you know," Alexander replied, his eyes meeting Sophia's with an intensity that momentarily stole her breath. For a split second, Sophia forgot this was all an act. The way he was looking at her, as if she were a puzzle he was determined to solve, made her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with the charade. The reporter finally departed, satisfied with her exclusive, leaving them alone at their corner table overlooking the city lights. "You're good at this," Alexander observed, withdrawing his hand from her back as soon as they were alone. Sophia immediately felt the absence of his warmth, but hid her reaction by taking another sip of champagne. "I've worked enough events to know how to handle the press, though I must say you surprised me with that 'she challenges me' line. Very convincing." It wasn't a line, Alexander stated matter-of-factly, cutting into his steak with precise movements. You do challenge me. Most people don't. Let me guess, they're too afraid of the great Alexander Sterling? Precisely. He glanced up from his plate. Fear or excessive deference makes for inefficient interactions. Sophia couldn't help but laugh. Only you would evaluate human connections in terms of efficiency. Alexander tilted his head slightly. How would you evaluate them? The question caught Sophia off guard. Was Alexander Sterling actually asking for her opinion? Authenticity, she replied after a moment. Mutual respect, the ability to be yourself without judgment, shared joy. She twirled her pasta thoughtfully. And in romantic relationships, there should be a spark, something inexplicable that draws you to the other person. Alexander considered this as if she'd presented a complex business proposal. Ineffable qualities are difficult to quantify. That's the point, Alex. Not everything valuable can be measured. His eyes narrowed slightly at the nickname, but he didn't correct her this time. Progress, Sophia thought with a private smile. The rest of dinner passed in surprisingly comfortable conversation. Alexander asked intelligent questions about her event planning career, and Sophia found herself genuinely interested in his latest project, developing affordable housing units, a venture that seemed at odds with his cutthroat reputation. It's still profitable, he explained when she expressed surprise, just with longer-term returns and broader community benefits. So you do have a heart, Sophia teased, then immediately regretted it when his expression closed off. It's sound business, he insisted, signaling for the check. The moment of connection had passed, and Alexander was back to his controlled self. Sophia felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. Outside the restaurant, the paparazzi had multiplied, their cameras flashing as Alexander guided Sophia to the waiting car, his arm protectively around her shoulders. Kiss her, someone shouted from the crowd of photographers. Sophia tensed, glancing up at Alexander uncertainly. Their contract hadn't specified public displays of affection beyond the basics. Alexander hesitated for only a moment before turning to her, his eyes asking a silent question. Sophia gave a nearly imperceptible nod. His hand came up to cup her cheek, surprisingly gentle as he leaned down. Sophia's eyes fluttered closed automatically, her pulse racing as his lips met hers in what was meant to be a chaste, publicity-serving kiss. But something unexpected happened. The moment their lips touched, a jolt of electricity seemed to pass between them. What should have been brief suddenly lengthened, deepened, as Alexander's arm tightened around her waist, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, Sophia was breathless, her mind spinning. Alexander looked equally stunned, his usual composure momentarily shattered as he stared down at her with darkened eyes. The cameras went wild, capturing a moment that had started as performance, but had somehow transformed into something neither of them had anticipated. Alexander recovered first, smoothly opening the car door for her. Once inside the privacy of the vehicle, an awkward silence fell between them. That was... Sophia began, unsure how to finish the sentence. Convincing, Alexander supplied, his voice slightly rougher than usual. The press will have no doubts now. Right, Sophia agreed quickly. That's what matters. Alexander cleared his throat, straightening his already perfect tie. Tomorrow morning I'll accompany you to the hospital for your father's transfer. The jet will be ready at 7 a.m. The abrupt change of subject was almost comical, but Sophia was grateful for it. The last thing she needed was to analyze why her fake husband's kiss had affected her so powerfully. Thank you, she said simply. They rode the rest of the way home in silence, each looking out their respective windows, careful not to acknowledge the tension that now hummed between them. The next morning, Sophia woke to the sound of a gentle knock on her bedroom door. Sophia? Are you awake? Alexander's voice came through the door. She glanced at the clock, 5:30 a.m., and quickly got out of bed, wrapping a robe around herself before opening the door. Alexander stood there already dressed in a casual but expensive-looking sweater and slacks, rather than his usual suit, a steaming mug in his hand. Coffee, he explained, offering it to her. Black with 1 sugar, correct? Sophia accepted the mug, surprised he'd noticed how she took her coffee. Yes, thank you. We leave in 30 minutes. The medical team is already at the hospital preparing your father for transport. Sophia nodded, taking a sip of the perfectly prepared coffee. "I'll be ready." True to his word, Alexander had arranged everything flawlessly. By the time they arrived at the hospital, her father was being carefully moved to the medical transport vehicle that would take him to the private airfield. Sophia held her father's hand throughout the transfer, whispering reassurances, though she wasn't sure he could hear her. The specialists explained that keeping him in a medically induced coma during transport was safest. "He's in good hands," the head doctor assured her. "The facility in Switzerland is the best in the world for this type of treatment." As they watched the medical jet take off, Sophia felt Alexander's presence beside her, steady and unexpectedly comforting. "Would you like to go with him?" Alexander asked suddenly. Sophia turned to him in surprise. "What?